So, you think you're untouchable? Well, pull on those jorts, put on that throwback jersey, and get ready for another classic pay-per-view review, You Can't See May style. It's time to look at Summerslam 2010 from August 15th at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. This show was nominated by Derek Dustin, Anthony Russo, Liam Dew, and Noah W. over on patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. The summer of 2010 in WWE was all about the Nexus, that group of 8 and soon 7 upstarts from the first season of the original incarnation of NXT, causing chaos on Raw, beating up everything and everyone, all united under a common purpose, fighting for a bigger picture. They'll never tell you what those reasons are or what that bigger picture is, but the mystery of it keeps it cool and interesting for a little while. They're competing in the main event tonight, 7-on-7 elimination against John Cena and his team, which is already coming apart at the seams, but we'll talk about that in the main event spot. Of course, I have talked at length about the Nexus and what happened to them on this particular show in a lot of detail in other videos throughout the history of this channel, but this is the first time I'm actually looking at the full show itself. What else is there going on in this card outside of the WWE Nexus feud that's worth watching? Let's find out. 17,463 folks are in attendance here, 350,000 pay-per-view buys, down a bit from the previous year. The opening high package is talking about how a change is coming is in the air. It's all around, and tonight it's here. They're really trying to shoehorn the theme of change into anything that's not related to the Nexus, and God bless them for trying. But if they succeed, oh, if they succeed, which feels like the farthest anyone in creative got in that hypothetical. Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, and SmackDown's Matt Striker is going to be on commentary for this matchup. By the way, many of you might know that after his time in WWE wrapped up, one of the biggest things Matt Striker did was when he did commentary for a show called Lucha Underground. It's a show that ran for 4 seasons in the mid-2010s on the El Rey Network. If you go over to the Patreon page, my writer, Mr. Ooh La La, and I have begun a new series on the page, the LU Review, where we do an episodic breakdown of every episode of Lucha Underground. And if you want to follow us on that journey, you can join by becoming a Patreon backer, patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. As little as $1 a month gets you access to the LU Review and so many more perks. Okay, I'm done shilling. Back to the review we go. Your opening match is for the Intercontinental Championship as Dolph Ziggler, with his main squeeze, Vicky Guerrero, in his corner, defends against the former champion, Kofi Kingston. It was Dolph who won the belt a couple of weeks ago on SmackDown when Vicky helped him. Dolph and Vicky had planned to go to Tahiti to celebrate, but GM Teddy Long made him defend the belt at the show tonight. Vicky wishes to be excused until she's cut off by Kofi's theme, SOS. Matt Striker on commentary here describing Vicky as Joan Jett if she were stung by bees, and I think he was trying to compliment her. Kofi goes high risk from the get-go, goes for a dive to the outside, and just eats barricade. Dolph takes advantage and works over Kofi for a long time. Cole on commentary worries that Kofi can't get that controlled frenzy going, which is just a really weird phrase. Kofi makes a big comeback, the action picks up, Dolph hits a famouser, but there's a kick out, we get a sleeper hold applied, then suddenly the Nexus storm the ring. Kofi is surrounded and is just eaten alive by the other 7 men. Wade Barrett on the microphone saying that WWE is so divided amongst its own men that even if they could find a 7th man for their team tonight, they couldn't get together to sign a birthday card, much less beat Nexus in a match. It's a good promo by Wade here. It helps set up the main event. It's not very often you see something like this happen, like where a story is told like throughout the evening of a pay-per-view. There's like an opening shot like this in an opening matchup or a promo so early in the show to remind you and build further to the main event, but I think it was pretty well done here. By the way, I will give the Kofi Ziggler match 1.5 stars up until the finish. Chris Jericho and Edge are backstage with Mr. Money in the Bank with Liquid US Championship, The Miz. Jericho telling Miz that they need him on Team WWE tonight. Edge is eating a Slim Jim while this is all going on. There's some corporate synergy there. Jericho keeping in theme with, Hollywood. They're in LA for the show. He says that if The Miz joins the team, it'll be bigger than Avatar, bigger than the Titanic, bigger than the Marine 3. Okay, that last part I was kidding. Miz says he'll think about it. He grabs Edge's meat stick on his way out of the room. I said what I said. Up next, it's the match that convinced Funkadactyl Cameron to pursue her wrestling dreams.
What's your favorite match?
My favorite match was with Melina and Alicia Fox.
It's a match for the Divas Championship as Alicia Fox defends against Melina, who is certainly no longer a heel since the last time we saw her here on the channel. She injured her knee about 8 or 9 months before this show, had to relinquish her Divas title. In recent weeks, Alicia Fox has won the title and claims no other Diva can defeat her, just in time for Melina to return from injury and challenge for the belt in her hometown. Melina has little patience for headlocks and starts swinging, hitting a lot of consecutive moves. Alicia trying to stall and it backfires. Melina skins the cat over the turnbuckle, appears to aggravate the old knee injury. Alicia throwing Melina shoulder first into the ring post now, so starts working on that body part. Melina hits a running drop kick, lets out a primal scream, and suddenly that leg is no longer an issue. She drives Fox's face into the mat for the cover and the win. Melina regains the Divas Championship. Afterward, Josh Matthews wants to interview her in the ring when Laycool interrupt. The co-holders of the women's title on SmackDown show up and berate Melina. Layla says they've run out of all the divas on SmackDown and are looking for competition. But first, time for a selfie for Twitter. But Melina has had enough. She attacks Michelle and Layla, but they fight back and beat her up. Alicia goes to join in, but she's attacked by Laycool for her efforts. I give it 1 star out of 5, pretty short match, and there were a couple of points in there where you kind of wondered if the stalling they were doing was part of the story or if they were just legitimately trying to collect themselves here. And yeah, the whole story of the knee being an issue and then it just not, I thought was kind of interesting. We are getting a lot of promos and stories being told like outside of the bells, not just the matches themselves, but like we saw in the IC title match, and we're seeing here kind of these post-match promos that are advancing other things. And so I think it's a lot of that in this show, and this is just kind of the first taste of it. Some of the celebrities at ringside: Trace Adkins, Marlon Wayans, Michael Clark Duncan, who is not pictured. Last month, they show Big Show unmasking a bald CM Punk, which was a pretty hilarious visual. The following week, Punk and the Straight Edge Society destroyed Show's punch in hand. That brings us to this matchup here. It's a handicap match as the Big Show takes on CM Punk, Luke Gallows, and Joseph Mercury of the SES. The Straight Edge Society, which also includes a young Serena Deeb, is the big heel faction on SmackDown right now. Punk is shaving people's heads and making them swear their allegiance to him. Punk tries to be very Manson-like as the leader of this strange team. He did feud with Rey Mysterio that resulted in his head getting shaved, led him to wearing this SES mask, which is a pretty funny way to go about hiding it for a while. So Show's hand was broken in storyline a couple of weeks ago, which now that I think about it seems to be a recurring trope throughout his career, especially when he used the punch as a finisher, was that it was just a repeatedly injured hand. But he is wearing it very heavily taped up in this matchup, and it's all black with a white X. And I remember on SmackDown leading up to this, I think it was Matt Stryker saying that it's like the symbolism is throughout all that darkness, there's a little bit of light in there. Like, okay. Show handling Gallows and Mercury with relative ease. He chases Punk around the outside, goes to chop Punk, but it just smacks the steel steps instead. Wait, what happened to his hand tape? Where'd that all go? The Society are all over him and regain control, working together to keep chopping away at Big Show, but the big man fights back for a bit. Mercury and Punk with a rough-looking double bulldog off the top. Punk continues to attack that injured hand. Show dumps Punk out of the ring, chokeslams Mercury onto Gallows, and covers them for the win. I give it 2 stars out of 5. Show looked impressive, batting away all 3 members of the Society in this matchup. It was fun seeing that story play out with the action they had, but it was pretty one-sided, and the outcome wasn't really much in doubt. CM kind of slithering away, the way he kind of escaped and let his goons take the beating from the Big Show. He goes on to fight another day. Mercury actually would tear his pec muscle in the course of this matchup here. So sadly, Mercury's run in the Straight Edge Society never really went very long due to his injury. Backstage, world champion Kane gently caresses a casket and talks to his brother The Undertaker, who is not there, but he promises to destroy Rey Mysterio for revenge against what Rey may or may not have done to The Undertaker. Suddenly in comes WWE champion Sheamus. He asks to borrow the casket for his match with Randy Orton. Kane says no. Sheamus says he's the real big red monster and warns Kane to stay out of his way. Kane is unfazed by this and threatens to disembowel Sheamus if he ever interrupts him again. Do you ever notice that during this time period, it was always when all the champions were heels that they got to have these kind of conference moments together? I felt that was happening in like 2006 when it was like King Booker and the Big Show and Edge. You have it here again when it's Kane and Sheamus. Oh, and also you had like JBL and Triple H before that. Like that just seems to be the thing. You love having these conferences, these meetings of these evil minds on different shows and just like, haha, let's be evil together. The Miz has made his his way to the ring in his gear. He's going to make his decision as to whether or not he'll join Team WWE. The fans seem to be mostly against that idea based on how they're sounding here. He claimed that earlier in the day, John Cena got down on his hands and knees and begged The Miz to join, and then he goes off to rattle on like what all the other members of the team seemingly did, allegedly did, to try and curry favor with The Miz. Like, Edge gave me a year's supply of Slim Jims, and John Morrison told me that he was the Jannetty of the team and I was the Shawn Michaels, and Chris Jericho gifted me a Fozzy CD. And I wonder, had the Great Khali still been in this team, what would his gift have been? Like, Great Khali wrote me a lovely sonnet. He says this choice is bigger than the Pepsi Challenge or Schwarzenegger being in Terminator 5 or LeBron James's decision. All very different things, by the way, which, by the way, now The Miz joining Team WWE is bigger than all those things, and Titanic, and Avatar. They are really laying in thick just how important it will be if The Miz joins this team. After a big pause, Miz says he will join the team. He chastises the fans for going along with his catchphrase before he does it himself. We're going to have to see how this plays out in the main event. Well, a man who just recently returned to WWE here in 2024, a man who's still chugging along today and delivering banger after banger, or I guess in this case, based on what the memes are saying, burger after burger, still chugging away today in 2024, but back in 2010, Sheamus was standing tall less than a year into his time there as WWE champion. It was quite a big deal to see Sheamus just kind of rocket up the card the way he did and beat John Cena in that tables match to become the champion. I remember watching at the time thinking, I didn't think that this guy was much of like a future Lesnar or Angle, kind of based on that trajectory, or an Orton, but I kind of saw him and the way they were pushing him, like, man, he must be a big deal. And, I grew to like Sheamus over time, of course, but back then, it was definitely shocking in an era that was very low on like genuine surprises. I think that Sheamus winning the title as early as he did in his career, I think counts as one of the biggest of that time period. Randy Orton won a triple threat with Edge and Jericho to become the #1 contender. If anyone interferes on Sheamus's behalf, that person will be suspended. No rematches for Orton if he loses here. Both guys trading blows early on. Orton in charge for a while, hits the Garvin stomps and so forth. Sheamus whips Randy into the steps to take over. Orton goes for his draping DDT, but is launched out of the ring. Sheamus just throws Orton's head into the barricade. The champ keeps wearing Orton down for several minutes until Orton comes back, and Cole calls this run of his a malignant run of momentum. Michael, Booby, please put the thesaurus down. Sheamus goes for a brogue kick but misses it and tumbles over the ropes. Orton hits the DDT, makes a lot of faces, goes for the RKO, but Sheamus blocks it. Orton tries it again, blocked again, brogue kick connects, but still not enough. Sheamus brings in a chair, the referee fights over it with him. Ref takes a tumble out as a result and disqualifies Sheamus. Sheamus swings and misses with a chair. Orton takes him to Dick Kick City, gets some revenge by hitting the RKO on the announce table, and that's how this ends up. I give it 3 stars out of 5. The DQ finish was disappointing, but I liked the physicality of everything that led up to it. I liked the hard-hitting nature of it. I think Sheamus, still pretty young into his run, really held his own against the far more experienced Orton, and this will set up for a rematch for them because Orton, didn't lose the match, doesn't lose his place in line, so gets another title match with Sheamus very soon after this. We see Devin Gray, star of the film Legendary, at ringside here. What are those pictures on Michael Cole's notes? I'm not sure if those exactly correlate to the wrestlers in the main event. Up next, a match for the World Championship as Kane defends against Rey Mysterio. The big story with Kane right now, aside from him being World Champion, is that he's on this one-man mission to destroy anybody who he thinks may have attacked his brother, The Undertaker. They say it happened on Memorial Day weekend. Taker was beaten up by somebody and it was put in a vegetative state. I just love they keep saying it happened on Memorial Day weekend because I can't stop picturing like The Undertaker is at some like backyard barbecue, like broad daylight, it's having a hot dog or something, then boom, someone attacks him and he turns into a vegetable. During this time, Kane has also won the Money in the Bank briefcase, cashed in on Rey Mysterio the very same night to win the World Heavyweight title a day late and $1 short. Kane's been on the warpath, finally pointing the finger at Rey Mysterio. Then on the Go Home SmackDown, Rey counters with, "Actually, Kane, it was totally you," which seemed like the obvious conclusion from the start of this angle here. Also, I love the way they dubbed whatever this is at the end of the hype package for this matchup.
like brother.
Kane comes to the ring with a casket. Nothing in here as we can see. The match starts out with Rey ducking and moving, trying to hit and run. Kane ultimately catches him and begins his destructive process, just knocking Rey about for a while. He catches him in a bear hug for a long time. Rey begins to fight back. He throws himself head first like a javelin at one point, goes for a top rope Hurricane Rana, and it's blocked. Rey hitting what Matt Stryker calls a modified slop drop. Kane snuffing all these comebacks out. He goes back to open the casket. Nothing inside still. Rey goes for a 619, but Kane blocks it. He tries to throw him into the casket, but Mysterio barely survives. Hits the 619 again. Kane shrugs it off. The chokeslam and the win. Kane retains the title. After the bell, Kane says Rey will pay for what he did to The Undertaker. He opens the casket. Nothing in there still, as expected. Mysterio fights back. Kane naturally shutting the casket closed again, puts Rey away with some more chokeslams and a tombstone. Kane opens the casket once more. Surely, like the other times, there will be nothing in this casket, but oh my God, it's The Undertaker, and boy does he look tired. He gets right in Rey's face, asks Rey why he did it. Rey pleading his case to The Undertaker, and you can barely hear him say, "I believe you," before he picks him up by the throat, then snaps his head around to Kane, which gets a big ol' pop. A goozle for a goozle. Kane is more powerful though, breaks away and hits a tombstone on his brother. I also give this one 3 stars out of 5. I always enjoy a good, big, little matchup, and Rey Mysterio, hands down, is the master at telling that kind of story. I think he did really good here. The match itself was okay. I think it was a very obvious but necessary setup to the continuation and the resurrection, I guess, of the Kane-Undertaker feud. And you know what? Even thinking back to this, all it did was seeing this reveal and the betrayal. It just all the memories flooded back into just how bad that angle and that twist was. Because I remember Kane's whole exposition afterward was like, I waited for the right time to beat you up to the point of a vegetative state. When it's like, why didn't you do that in 97? Why'd you wait this long? There's a reason that I put this reveal and this twist in my worst of Kane countdown from a decade ago on this channel. And it's just very silly. Who would have thought that it wasn't Kane who did it? It's so obvious. We get a video package and all the community outreach WWE did in LA that week. Then it's time for our main event, a 7-on-7 elimination match for no stakes in particular, as Team WWE battles the Nexus. The Nexus. Boy, what a case study in what might have been with these guys. Of course, like I mentioned, these are the fellas who joined up after the first season of NXT. Wade Barrett wins the overall competition and becomes the leader of the group, who of course had their iconic debut on an episode of Raw, destroying everyone in the ring, destroying the ring itself. Daniel Bryan choking out Justin Roberts with a necktie, which leads to his immediate firing. I think the Nexus had one of the coolest and most just memorable debuts of all time. I think a reason that to this day, people like myself still kind of feel harshly about the way the Nexus storyline went is because this began in such a dynamic, different way that no one had seen before. It was so just shocking for the time. Again, this was a very boring period in WWE's history. It cannot be emphasized just how bad 09 through 011 was for that sort of thing. So like I mentioned, a period of time where surprises, good, fun surprises, were pretty minimal. Sheamus winning the title and the Nexus making their debut are the 2 ones I can think of where man, that's those are, I did not expect that. That's actually pretty darn neat. They've been beating up Bret Hart, Ricky Steamboat, Mr. McMahon, and so forth, fighting for a bigger purpose we'll never know the actual details of. Meanwhile, John Cena has quietly formed a team to fight the big bad Nexus at SummerSlam, but Wade Barrett somewhat presciently predicts that the combined egos and personal motivations of these WWE guys, it's going to cause the team to collapse before it even begins. And he's kind of proven right, because as the weeks go on, Edge and Chris Jericho quit the team. The great Khali, who was an original team member, he is removed from that. And they brought Bret Hart back to do this as well. So he's kind of in this, he was a former GM, and now he's competing in this matchup. Edge and Jericho do come back at the last minute out of self-preservation. And on the go-home show, there is a really cool moment here where the 2 teams face off, and the crowd is so amped for the blow-off that the hard cam shot is literally shaking. I love when that sort of thing happens. The Nexus make their entrance, then team captain Cena comes out, followed by his longtime rival Edge, R-Truth, far from the beloved comedy act he will eventually become, Chris Jericho, John Morrison, who doesn't come out with his jacket, I cry foul on that, Bret Hart, then out comes The Miz, but suddenly John Cena pipes up, says Miz is arrived way too late, and they already went and found the 7th member of the team, Daniel Bryan, the former original member of the Nexus, who got fired after that necktie incident. What a cool moment to see Daniel Bryan come back this way. I think everybody, including WWE themselves, like knew the firing was bullshit, and like they had to do it to cover their tracks for, you know, for the big kerfuffle, I guess, because Mattel didn't like it allegedly. And so they bring him back and they put him in the main event spot in this thing with the Nexus, like he was storyline cast out from, is how they explained his absence here. And so for him to come back this way was a really cool surprise. I mean, surprise in the sense that, like, if people who weren't on social media, because if that was apparently a thing that happened, was about a half hour before this moment, the social media team already spoiled that Daniel Bryan had come back. So kind of a boneheaded move, but, you know, it happens to the best of us, I suppose. Bryan making Darren Young tap out right away to the label lock. Michael Tarver comes in, peppers R-Truth with a lot of punches. Lawler on commentary actually misnames Daniel Bryan and calls him Bryan Danielson for one moment. Morrison hits Starship Pain on Tarver for another quick elimination. Suddenly, Nexus is down by 2. In comes Skip Sheffield, the future Ryback. He hits Jomo with some big slams. We hear a "We Want Brett" chant. Sheffield with his 4th or 5th suplex on Morrison now. A cheap shot by Justin Gabriel allows for Skip to hit a big clothesline. Morrison's out and R-Truth is gone very soon after. Jericho takes some heat but gets a hot tag to Brett, who shows some signs of the old excellence of execution. You know, something I learned a little while ago, well before I rewatched this show, was that during this time period, Brett actually worked a couple of house show dates, like in various versions of this matchup, and he was really restricted on what he could do on television because of the conditions of his insurance policy. He couldn't wrestle anymore, couldn't do a lot of stuff, but on the house show stuff, he's like doing a lot more things, like very close to what he does on this show. And one thing I thought was also interesting was it's all with Heath Slater. It's the one guy he trusts out of the whole Nexus to do any of that stuff with. I think that's such a cool little tidbit. The sharpshooter is locked in, but a chair is brought into the ring. Brett grabs it and gets to swinging. That gets him disqualified. Typical Bret Hart, swinging a chair around like he did so much in his prime. Sheffield takes a code breaker and a spear. He's out of here. Stryker on commentary does manage to fit in like one tiny commercial for NXT, like slips that in under the cracks as this match is going on. Say, hey, you know, NXT, it's all about new stars and new faces, so trying to put over this show. I don't even think it's on Sci-Fi yet at this point. I think it's still on like an online exclusive, so good little last minute ad for it, Matt. Jericho shows some rare babyface fire as he puts David Otunga in the walls. Mr. Harvard taps. We get an accidental collision between Jericho and Cena that leads to Y2J being eliminated. Things immediately break down between John and Edge. Edge is also shoved into Cena and rolled up to be eliminated. And then Edge and Jericho just gonna beat up John for a little bit. Daniel Bryan sitting there and doing nothing. John gets worked over by the Nexus members for a while as Michael Cole berates Daniel Bryan the whole time, putting over how The Miz should have been picked. Bryan finally gets the hot tag. Stryker just yells, "Cattle mutilation! Come on, roll him over!" D-Bry's a house of fire. He counters a roll-up with the label lock on Slater. The tap, we're at 2 apiece. The Miz runs in, blasting Bryan from behind with his briefcase that allows Wade to pin and eliminate the future Yes Man. Cena down 2-1 against Barrett and Gabriel. The Nexus baddies peel back the padding off the concrete floor. Barrett hits Cena with a DDT, and wow, what a devastating maneuver. How can John Cena possibly overcome these 2-1 odds after getting his brain splattered on the concrete? Oh, never mind. He avoids a 450 splash from Justin Gabriel, covers him to eliminate him, down to Cena and Barrett, who is immediately caught in the STF and taps out. Cena wins for Team WWE. Thank you, John Cena, they say, as WWE has survived all of the egos and whatnot as we fade to black. This one gets 3 stars out of 5 for me. You know, elimination matches that get this big, I hate how easily people can just be susceptible to like a surprise roll-up in this matchup, or a clothesline is enough to eliminate somebody. And so there's some definite Survivor Series syndrome when stuff like that happens here. That being said, there were some cool stories like woven into this one. Again, I love the surprise of Daniel Bryan coming back and how The Miz kind of tries to almost cost the team due to his jealousy over that. I think that's really well done. then the finish, man. Like, this is something that is just, it's Super Cena personified. And this is something that in interviews and stuff you've heard about it since, like Edge and Chris Jericho, like, did not agree that this is the way to go. They thought that the Nexus should have gone over. At the very least, maybe don't make Cena so powerful, but like, this was the finish that they went with. And, you know, Cena himself has gone back and saying, maybe it was a touch too much. And yeah, I think this absolutely ruined the Nexus. You know, I've said it before, it's not necessarily a hot take, but when you watch it again here, it really just makes everything the Nexus did up to this point absolutely pointless. Like, they would continue for a while in different permutations and versions, and John Cena would eventually kind of join the group at one point, but it was all so aimless and meaningless. You can watch my whole video I did on the Nexus to get more of an understanding of what happened, but this matchup right here is just, this was the turning point. I think if things played out differently in this matchup, we'd be saying a very different story about the Nexus. I'm not saying that they needed to like win the whole war, but considering this is the first real battle you had with the opposition and the heroes, you need to have that Empire Strikes Back moment. You need to have that moment of doubt where the baddies actually, you know, not just these meaningless fights that don't happen during matches or whatever. When the match counts, you got to have a win like that. And it's ridiculous they didn't think to do it that way, because you could have made the Nexus storyline a whole lot more interesting for the rest of 2010. But I guess after 2 months they thought, well, the intrigue is clearly dead. Let's just kill them here. My grade for SummerSlam 2010 is a D+. This is not a great SummerSlam. I'm sorry. There's not much you can really mine from this that says, oh, what an iconic SummerSlam moment this is, or oh, that was a really good match. Like, when you have so many people tied up in that one match at the end of the main event, it really puts a lot more pressure on the undercard to over-deliver and overperform. And even though like the WWE and world title matches were fine, they weren't amazing. And obviously I think they went to serve larger storyline beats ultimately. And then there was just like the rest of the card, which wasn't that much of it, and it wasn't that great. And so I did like the overarching storyline of the Nexus, kind of like them going back to that throughout the night. I think that the whole thing of them, you know, storming that opening matchup, and then you see the will he or won't he for the Miz, and then you've got the payoff there in the matchup. Like, that whole thing I thought was really well done, but then the match ended the way it did. And I think that if that was different, then we have a very different story about this show overall. But I think that arc of the Nexus was pretty good. We had a lot of storytelling on this show. Like I said, it was all more set up to like set up things in the future than it was to really definitively end anything here on this show itself. It's just more often than it feels like for pay-per-views, and it wasn't really to the detriment of the show, I think. But yeah, there was just like, yeah, the mid-card, undercard matches didn't really do much for me, and man, that main event, what else can I say? But what did you think of SummerSlam 2010? I want to hear about it in the comment section below. And hey, if you like this review, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Next time here on the Classic Review, it's the final installment of You Can't See Me, classic pay-per-view review style. We're going to jump ahead a couple of years in the timeline. It's a big deal. Brock Lesnar is back in WWE after several years away. So what better opportunity to feed him to John Cena than Extreme Rules 2012. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.